Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Divi Nation. This is a brand new podcast and YouTube show by Elegant Themes, a leader in the premium WordPress theme and plugin development market. I'm your host, Nathan B. Weller, and I'm ready to do episode number 3. We're talking about one of my all-time favorite topics today, storytelling design. Our guest host, who will be helping us explore this topic, is Melissa Love. Melissa is a designer living and working out of her home in Cornwall, England. She's been running her own design business for 8 years now, and it doesn't look like she'll be slowing down anytime soon. Melissa is also the founder of thedesignspace.co, where she offers website design and branding packages specifically for photographers, a group that she's very familiar with since she also happens to be a food photographer herself. Melissa, welcome to Divi Nation.
Hi, Nathan. It's really good to be here.
Oh, it's awesome to have you. I've really enjoyed, getting to know you through some emails and Skype chats recently, and I think it's going to be a fun episode.
I'm so excited because I'm addicted to podcasts, and I'm finally on one. So I'm really, really looking forward to this.
I'm actually really anxious to jump into our topic today because it's something that I feel like I write and talk about a lot anyway. So are you ready to just jump in and do this?
Yeah, we've got lots to cover, and I know we're quite excited about this topic, so let's do it.
Cool. So our first segment today is called This Week in WordPress. Here it is. This week in WordPress, there are 3 stories that caught my eye. I sent them ahead of time to Melissa, our Divi Nation guest host this week, and asked her to provide any stories that she might want to talk about. Turns out that she really liked the 3 that I picked, so we're going to cover those first, and if we have any time left over, we might throw in 1 or 2 more. So, first article. It's called How Neuroscientist Michael Gribko Defines Storytelling. So in this article/episode, neuroscientist talks about how storytelling appears to be fundamental to what it means to be human, how our brains have evolved to learn better with and through stories, how empathy allows us on a neurological level to literally live the stories that we experience. And in the end, he points out that it's no wonder those who are able to tell great stories not only capture the imagination of the world, but also tend to be quite successful in that world as well. Melissa, did you read or listen to this, and what did you think?
I thought it was brilliant because it's kind of one of those, it's something that I've been thinking about for about 3 years, and I can tell you why. I had an experience that triggered that. But it is the fundamental human condition, going back to cavemen writing on walls to tell the story of, what it means to be human. So it makes perfect sense. I think what the article doesn't really get to the heart of is, such a fascinating concept, but how do you apply that in the real world?
Yeah, they didn't really get into super specifics. And I think, though, it's a good first step for people who are like, okay, I need to, just get introduced to this topic. Why should I care? And I think they talk about why you should care, which is really cool.
Well, I think what's fascinating about it is this is something that happened to me probably 3 or 4 years ago. I was working with an amazing company who are in Ohio, actually. They work with a load of Amish craftsmen making these beautiful handmade boxes. They're called HH Boogie. And they are really amazing at telling the story of their brand because it's so fascinating that, that we can't show pictures of the craftspeople, can only show their hands. There's all sorts of kind of restrictions on the work that they can do. And these are beautiful presentation boxes for photographers. So the guy who runs that company is called Jeremy Kester, and he's a fascinating businessman and a theorist as well as running this company. So we used to have lots of these really in-depth conversations when we were building his brand and his website. And it's hhboogie.com if anyone's interested. And it's not a Divi site yet. I built it about 3 years ago. But he said to me, do you know what's amazing? Most people, when they're building their website, they miss the fundamental idea that building a website is about having a conversation. So whether it's storytelling, if that seems like too difficult a concept to really break down and apply to your website, no matter what your website is, I tell people you have to think of it like a conversation. And imagine if I met you at a party, we'd probably say, hey, what's your name? Who are you? So that's kind of the first part of the storytelling. They have to know when they land on your site who you are. And then when you're at a dinner party or a cocktail party, you say, hey, what do you do for a living? So the next thing is they need to know what you do. And people are very comfortable with this format. And they say, really? You're a photographer / accountant / that's so weird because, I need an accountant slash wedding photographer or whatever it is. So that's that middle bit, the empathy, the kind of human connection where people find you relatable or your story relatable. And then at some point, they're going to ask for the proof. Hey, I'd love to see your work slash, whatever. And you say, oh, well, I have a website. Oh, really? Do you? Oh, how can I get in touch with you? Here's my card, the contact part or the resolution. So I would say to people, let's imagine how you want to really walk someone through a conversation. You have to decide at the very beginning whether you want to go, hey, my name is this and I do this. Here's the proof, whether you want to get all in their face about it and be taking them straight to your galleries or whatever, your portfolio, whatever you're demonstrating to them, or whether you want a more conversational style where you lead them through getting to know you, the building a rapport, the working out how you're going to be together. So for me, that was a perfect, a more kind of intellectual breakdown of the whole storytelling slash conversation thing, which I think deeply on and always use with my clients.
Yeah, so I think, one of the things, if anybody's read my posts on elegant themes over the last, year, a little over a year that I've been writing for them, I think what they'll see is storytelling is the topic that I refuse to shut up about, because what I've learned as I've studied it and how it intersects with, particularly anyone who needs to communicate effectively with other people, is that when you learn these fundamental principles of storytelling and how they affect or how they apply to human beings in general, you can apply those principles to like almost literally any aspect of life that involves communication. So that organizing, learning, marketing, design, whatever that is, storytelling plays a really big part in that because it exists on such a fundamental level of what it means to be human. I could talk about this all day, so maybe we should jump to the next article. Is that cool?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, cool. So article number 2, how to create effective content experiences. And this is definitely a good follow-up. This second article is yet another Rainmaker.fm show that was featured in a blog post, and the show is called The Mainframe. This article / episode talks about using something called adaptive content to create richer content experiences that work for attraction, retention, and conversion. It's really fascinating stuff, and I'd highly recommend everybody to listen or read not just this installment that I'm going to link to in this video, but the 2 installments about adaptive content that they did before it as well. For those who are not familiar with the concept, adaptive content is basically an approach to content creation that takes advantage of a keen understanding of your audience to target customized content for a very specific time and through very specific mediums to get the maximum impact. An example that we're all probably familiar with, especially everybody on Facebook, is if you're following any sort of pop culture or new media news agencies, they've developed this sort of instant contextual news cycle. So as soon as a story breaks, they're creating customized native articles and videos that not only talk about the story, but they also talk about the story through the narrative lens of their specific audience. So BuzzFeed's going to cover the story through the perspective of a liberal-leaning millennial. Fox is going to cover it from a conservative baby boomer perspective, and then Vice News is going to take some type of edgy countercultural perspective. They're all going to be talking about the exact same thing, telling the exact same story, but they're going to be speaking to it in a lens that references the values. So this approach of it actually maximizes the context of the moment, which is the big breaking story and people's interest in it, and it brings that down to a values level for their specific community. It delivers to them through a medium or channel that's literally just right where they are and in their pocket, in their newsfeed, whatever, in a place where they can instantly interact with it. So then, of course, after that initial interest or initial interaction, there's the task of creating a chain of these types of content interactions or relationships that build a pipeline from attraction to retention to conversion. I know that probably sounds complicated to a lot of people, and that's because it is. But I think, if you're someone who's figured out how to use WordPress and you've given, and you give yourself enough time and enough space to think about this, you could definitely learn these principles and apply these principles to whatever it is you're doing online too. What were your initial thoughts on the article, Melissa?
I found this article really useful because I have been researching lately how to target kind of different niche sectors in people of the design space and market to them specifically. And I've been really struggling with how to do this in real life, because what I've been doing up until now is marketing everything I have to all the people I know, which is just dumb and generalist. It's not really going to resonate deeply with the different sectors I want to. So I've only really just started to now say, well, look, I do market to photographers, but I also market to people who run restaurants. And we're now kind of carving up what our assets are that we can so we can create landing pages, that we're going to write articles at those niches. We're going to get them to segment our mailing list so that we're sending the right content, we're going to the right people, and then we're going to follow that through on our social media. And we're going to create some specific free assets to tease people into that funnel. I know these are fundamental basic online marketing principles, but because we've been busy and we've been lucky to be quite successful, we haven't really had time to kind of zero in on how to do this properly. So to me, this article came at absolutely the right time. We literally had a marketing meeting today, and it was lucky that I read this yesterday, because it really helped crystallize how in real life those kind of principles apply. So I found it absolutely brilliant. I particularly liked what I hadn't considered doing was really tailoring my blog post to specific kind of sectors, and then going out and finding these people and saying, you should read this.
Right. Yeah. So having so I guess, to bring it, I gave the news context, but in a way that's still sort of old school, because those, news organizations have been doing that sort of narrative lens technique for a long time, and they just kind of migrated it to the internet. But someone like you or me who has a single service, we're not talking about a million different topics depending on, whatever is trending nationally or internationally. We're actually talking about our services and our business all the time, but we have to find, different ways to change and shape that narrative depending on who we're trying to market to. And we can't do that sort of, like what you said, the shotgun approach, the generalist approach. It works, but not well, and not nearly as effectively. And I think, with, the kind of metrics that we're able to get with online publishing, people are really starting to take notice of that. Yeah.
What is fascinating, it was saying if you don't have adaptive content, or tailored content, I suppose is another way to think of it. You are going to resonate a little bit with a lot of people, but that resonance isn't going to be enough to make them purchase from you. And that was kind of the key learning lesson for me, that, having some things in common isn't enough to make them like me to the point of thinking, well, actually the thing they are offering is going to completely solve my problem, as opposed to, well, it's partially aimed at me and it will partially solve my problem.
Right. And, absolutely.
So a little bit of having something in common just isn't enough. And that was a really important learning point, I think, with that one.
Awesome. Well, let's jump to article number 3. This will be interesting to see how this plays out. Article number 3, is Facebook trying to knock out blogging platforms such as Medium and WordPress with notes? So my third article was from adweek.com, and it's all about how Facebook is like revisiting its notes feature, which I'm sure most everyone has forgotten about for the most part by now, because it's, been more or less like a clunky plain text editor version of a feature of online publishing. But now they're taking, a revised look at it. Apparently, I mean, that's the rumor. And they're trying to make it more like a Medium platform, or something that would be conducive rather to, attractive long form content. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, why wouldn't they do that? The structure exists that Facebook wants everyone to stay in Facebook all the time. So, and one of the first things I thought is they seem to really jump on whatever's hot. So suddenly, kind of a year ago, all the talk was about these millionaire YouTube vloggers who are like 12 and earning millions of pounds, and everyone hates them. Then, funnily enough, strangely, Facebook beefs up there, encourage you to start uploading videos directly into Facebook, telling you it's more effective. I wouldn't be surprised if there's going to be a tab for like 10-minute podcasts on your page soon. Whatever's hot.
Yeah, they're building a total environment. That's their goal, right? I mean, they want, they've made it, they've done a lot of things, which I'm not sure everybody's probably aware of, is that, you can sell straight through Facebook now, through your Facebook page. They did the short form updates. They've got, the engine in place for social sharing and recommendations. They got the native video now. And so now I think they're really just trying to corner the internet markets like environment and say, okay, well, you can also do, if you're sharing your content here, why don't you just create it here? It'll perform better. And so that's what they're going to be doing with this as well. How do you think this will affect WordPress? I mean, I can give my thought on it, but if you can go first, if you like.
Well, it's really interesting because I remember kind of in the industry in the photography industry, probably about 5 years ago, everyone was going, hey, you don't need blogs anymore, just build a really great site, blogging is dead, and all this kind of thing. And that was not just in that industry, but people, you might as well just do it all on Facebook and social media. But actually it hasn't killed off blogging is stronger than ever. And I think nowadays I think podcasting is really a great example of how easy it is to follow. I find it much easier to follow podcasts than feeds, because there's been a lot of upheaval in the feed burner world and the way you can aggregate and follow. And it's not as nice an experience as opening up my podcast app on iTunes and having a browse. You have to be you have to save it to a folder, and I find following blogs hard work. And I think, but I think that's changing. And once blogs become even easier to follow, people are going to enjoy having this magazine style way of reading. I don't think Facebook will ever kill it, but for people who they might capture a big segment of the market that's too scared to start a blog or doesn't know how, or I think people think, oh well, I'll just do this, it's easier.
Yeah, my immediate thought was that this is going to be this might turn into, like, if Facebook Notes truly becomes Medium-esque, it's like that easy and that attractive, I think it might become the blogging platform of choice for anyone who more or less just wants to blog or just wants to occasionally blog. They don't want, so sites like Ghost and Tumblr and Medium, yeah, I think they do have to look out. But for the core WordPress users, they've moved away from WordPress as a platform just for blogging a long time ago. They want a website. They want not just a website, but a website that they control completely and they own all the content on it. Facebook, like I said, they're cornering the market in a lot of ways on web content. But what sort of sucks about that at the same time, they make it really easy and they make it really convenient to share and effective to share. But what sucks is they now own that content. And if that's something that you've spent a lot of time, building your business on top of their platform, and you're depending on things to function a certain way, to look a certain way, to be a certain way, and they make a high level change, you can't do anything about that. You're going to be stuck with whatever decisions they make about your business. And, I think some people are going to be okay with that, but I think the vast majority of people who are already kind of what the core WordPress people are, I think they're going to want that control. And I don't think WordPress is going to really encroach on that audience too much.
Well, I think one of the reasons I love blogging is I like people to be reading my content whilst they're surrounded by the trappings of my brand. Yeah. I don't want big blue Facebook stuff all surrounding my beautifully crafted words and my visuals. I want my nice white editorial looking white space site to be framing what I've written. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think if you're anyway design oriented, you love having a blog because it's like having your own personal plaything to make pretty and enjoy using.
Absolutely. Well, I think that just about does it for This Week in WordPress. If you'd like to read articles we've discussed, you can find them linked in the video description or within the blog post over at elegantthemes.com for Divi Nation Episode 3. So each week, I like to give our guest hosts a chance to share their story. I think it's a great way for us to get to know them and for everybody in the community to kind of relate to the people that we're having on, because in a lot of ways, we're featuring people who have extraordinary experiences. They've seen an abnormal level of success, and there's somebody who we want to emulate, but I think we also want to relate to them. And since this is a storytelling episode, it seemed like we should probably keep on with the trend. So, Melissa, can you just give us some general background? What's your story?
Sure. Well, my story is that my background in design is not one of formal training, which I think people are always interested to hear, and it's reassuring to hear that other people have been able to have some measure of success without the kind of formal training. But that being said, I did grow up with two graphic designer parents, and they put me to work around age 12. I think I started proofreading for them around 10, and we were really geeky. We would sit around the dinner table just talking about fonts, and I remember thinking, I can never bring anyone here. I'll never have a boyfriend. Look at my weird geeky family. And I left home at 18 to go to college. I didn't want to study design, and I was kind of like, see you losers working in our spare bedroom. That's not going to be me. Well, anyway, here I am. So I went off and did anything but design for a good 10 years or so till I had kids. But it's a bit like when you have any skill, like a bit of photography, people are always like, oh, can you just design this flyer for my lost cat? And can you just design me a business card? So I kind of did keep up with trends. And it wasn't until I had kids, I looked around for another job, and I started a little magazine in my local area, kind of a mini glossy thing. And I was so desperate to not have to go out to work and leave my kids, for 10 hours a day. And in the intervening 10 years, I should say, I was a general manager of a hotel, which is a really stressful job, and you do very long hours. So I knew I didn't want to go back to that. So I came up with this crazy idea that I would start this magazine, and I didn't really have any qualifications to do this. And I found a good production house who had an in-house design team, and I kind of pounded the pavement with my children in a buggy, literally selling advertising space. And I kind of sold out the first 6 months. I must have been desperate. I think I probably used my children. Look at the poor children. But it worked really well. And the magazine was a real success. And I bought myself 6 months of breathing space to work on the look and feel and write articles. And I did everything. I took the pictures, I wrote the articles, I designed the ads for people. Wow. And it was pretty funny. I was like the ultimate one-man or one-woman business. People thought I had this huge team. I'm like, hang on, I'll just pass you to sales.
Hello, sales here.
Yeah, it was very funny to kind of be doing all these things. But as time went on, I kind of got into the swing of it. And I built this website for the magazine because I thought that could have a directory on it. And it was built not even with WordPress. It was built with something like, what are they called? It wasn't Wix. It was the other one. I can't remember the name of it, but it was some drag and drop Flash thing. Oh, okay. But that was the first website I ever built. And a lot of my clients who are advertising the magazine were like, "That is beautiful. Could you build one of them for me?" So I took on a few of those, and I started to get more involved with the design of the magazine, saying, "Look, guys," to the design people I was working with, can you change that? I want this font." And they were like, "Wow, you really love this part of it." And I got really tired of the monthly grind, the stress of getting a magazine out and doing all the things, all the different roles. And I was just started to really fall in love with the design. And at that point, I had my best friend from college came down for the weekend, and she was a photographer. And she said, "Look at my horrible website." And it was horrible. "Please, can you fix it?" So in a weekend, we just kind of did a quick makeover. And she said, "This is great. How much do you charge?" And I said, at the time, it's the equivalent of like $300. And she was like, "This is ridiculous. I paid this person in America $3,500 to build this terrible thing. What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I don't know what I'm doing." I didn't actually, this is true. But she recommended me to a friend who was also a photographer. And she said, "I've told her you charge £1,000. This is like $2,000. It's like a mass." I was like, "That's ridiculous. She'll never pay it." So I turn up to go and work with this lovely lady who's still a good friend to this day. And she said, "This is fantastic. I'm going to refer you to my other friend. And I've told you charge $1,500. You must, it's more than worth it because I paid £3,000 to this other man who completely ripped me off. This is a bargain." So, I mean, I look back at it now. I was starting to play around with WordPress, and I still use a platform called Show It, which is very much photographer based, a drag and drop thing. And, so I kind of got into it in the easy way with a very visual builder. So people wanted blogs to go with it, and that's when I started to kind of get involved with WordPress and thinking, "Oh, this is hard."
Yeah. So what was that transition into WordPress like? I mean, you were using a different platform just for like portfolio building, basically. Is that then having a blog. Yeah. So what did WordPress add to that equation?
It added a whole load of difficulty I didn't have. I didn't do an awful job. I just didn't know what I know now about structuring WordPress, and it was purely for blogging. I didn't know what I know now about SEO and security and all the things that help you deliver a really fantastic service. But those clients are still, bless them, still with me today. And because of that initial group of 4 or 5 referrals, I then got referred to the UK's leading photography training company, which is called Aspire Photography Training. And their owner, Catherine Connor, is an incredible business inspiration to me. And she kind of became my fairy godmother. She said, "Do you know what? I would love you to come up and train people about design, how to invest in their brand, because I was a brand specialist really
Yeah.
by that point. And I'd sold the magazine. In the meanwhile, I sold that because I decided to do this. Or rather, I went to this show. I went to a big trade show in London, and my husband said, "Look, what are you doing? You're kind of spending all your free time designing these photography websites, and you're kind of not developing the magazine. You've got to make a decision. It's one or the other, I think. Otherwise, you're going to do two things very averagely rather than doing one thing brilliantly."
Right.
I said, I'm going to go to this show, and I said, I'm going to come back hopefully with, say, let's say if I come up with £5,000 worth of bookings, then I think it's a goer. Well, I went to this show, I met the owner of this incredible training company, and she invited me to become one of their trainers. And I had a stand that someone else had paid for, which was so kind. And the show at the platform in the States had come over to support me and had paid for it. And I came back with a whole year's worth of bookings. So kind of
Whoa.
10,
That's awesome.
Yeah, 5 times what I'd wanted or expected to do, and 10 new clients. And I went home and I said, that's it, I'm selling the magazine. I'd already kind of had someone running it for me. I said, this is what I want to do. I'm so excited. And I think thanks to that show and a couple of very well-known clients I picked up from that show who are based in the US, and from being invited to be a trainer, I had this kind of explosion of interest, which nearly killed me, actually, for about 2 years. I kept putting my prices up, and there were more people and, more referrals. And I look at it, it was an incredibly exciting time. But it was quite a dark time. I just didn't know how to cope with that volume of interest, and still, I didn't really have the resources to pay someone to deal with all the inquiries politely and in a timely way. So and I was still in that kind of, feast or famine mentality. I'm self-employed. I'll say yes to everything. I seem to be juggling 25 clients at once. So it took me a long time to kind of come out of that, it's okay to turn work down, to move into that phase of, we aren't a good fit. I found it very hard to say no. I'm now fine. This is probably, 3 or 4 years on now. I'm really lucky. I only take a custom, a work one-to-one with someone every kind of 2 or 3 months, and I only ever have one client at a time. It's like a whole new revelation. It took me about 3 years to kind of come out of that horrible.
Oh wow, yeah. To go back just a hair, so when you get something like, at the time when you had like 10 clients and you wanted to space them out over a year, I don't know if that's how it actually worked or not, or if you ended up working on all of them at the same time, but when you get a big batch of clients and it's more than you can handle at one time, how do you retain them when you have to say, hey, I'll get around to you in 3 months or something like that?
Well, I didn't do it very well in the beginning, and I'll be the first person to admit that. It was a hard lesson to learn. It only affected maybe about 2 or 3 clients, and they're still my clients. I'm still good friends with them, but a couple of them said to me, you've taken longer than you said you would. And, or you didn't reply when I thought you would. And that was really difficult to hear, and I really learned from it. And they said, it's fine, we definitely want to carry on, but we just wanted you to know that. And you have to hear hard things sometimes to make big changes. So I think at that point I had this huge waiting list, and I had put my prices up a lot, probably doubled, tripled, and I sat down one day and I thought, I can't do this alone. I have to have some confidence to invest into the business. So that's when I started to make friends with and recruit freelancers to do the things I didn't want to do. And the first thing I did was I invested in a project manager who could run the office. So I didn't have to deal with any email inquiries. I never had to do accounts. I didn't have to set up appointments. So Nicola's been with me for quite a long time now. You've just probably seen her kind of scuttling around inside. She deals with all the clients magnificently. She's so friendly and polite. She gets back to them within everybody, and now it's hard, right? Because you get tweeted, you get Facebook messages, you get, people tagging you on Instagram. Hey, I'd love to hear from you. Can I, you get inquiries in so many different ways. We found a really efficient system to funnel them all down into one kind of program, which she can kind of, we can both see what's going on. And I invested in her, and 2 or 3 days a week, and it's the best thing I ever did. Suddenly this whole weight of admin was removed, and I could really just do the things I liked. Then I got to, and because, the front end design is really my strong point. I would say that I'm a much, quite a strong coder these days, but back, you learn and you learn and you learn. But and I still now I outsource things that I don't want to do anymore. As soon as I get to a point where I don't want to do a thing, so I now have someone who upgrades all the client sites, manages updating plugins and things like that. So every time I get to a point where I say this is impacting negatively on me being able to produce more of what I'm good at, I hire someone in and I pay them to do that. So
that sounds great.
And
I
yeah,
mean, it sounds like
it's
a really
scary.
smart way to do it, but I think, I think it is scary too, because I mean, I've been in that position before where I've had to outsource, and if you do it well, like what you're talking about, it can be a real lifesaver. If you don't do it well, you can end up doing the same work that you normally would do, plus other people's mistakes, fixing their mistakes. So it can be challenging. What is there any, just, I know this is not our main topic, but is there any, since it sounds like you have experience with this, I don't know, principles or guidelines you would give people that are looking to bring on someone new to help them manage their workload?
Well, I think sometimes it seems like too big a job. You think, well, by the time I've trained them, I could just do all this backlog of work I have myself. So I would just say it gets worse before it gets better, because you're effectively teaching them how to do it, and they can't do it as well as you, and they're doing it more slowly, and they keep asking you questions, and that can be frustrating. But actually, when you start to see the results, you then see, massive improvement in your kind of day-to-day available time. And I think that's just a letting go thing. Like when I let go someone to, I now say to Nicola, could you get this person to fix up a call with them next week? And then at first I struggle with that. I'm like, well, who am I to have someone to fix up my calls? Like I'm some high-powered person who, should have a secretary, or just,
Right.
it feels a bit wrong, You have to just get over that and say, no one's going to think it's weird. It's okay to, to let people who are better at that do that.
At some point in our pre-interview discussion process, we kind of settled on storytelling design as our main topic. When you mentioned that with each design project, you try to kind of elevate your design. I'm not sure if you said it, but it came across as almost like on an emotional level or on an impact level by using story. Could you maybe explain in a bit more specific detail what you mean by that?
Well, I think anybody who is marketing to people and who has a website to do that, essentially is marketing a luxury product. And by that, I mean, you might say needing an accountant isn't a luxury, but, I'm sure do you know Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Yes.
Where, man's basic conditions, you have to satisfy food, shelter, it's not that,
Right.
It's not.
It's more in the self-actualization area.
Yeah. So, anything above basic food, shelter, protection for your family, in my mind, is some kind of luxury good where you can choose to have it or you can choose to have not. It's just a degree of, as you said, self-actualization. So when you're in that luxury, and I'm calling it luxury, it's probably the wrong word, and I'm sure there's a better one, but in that market where people don't have to have your product to survive in the world. And sometimes it is. So I know people who've been trying to make it in photography, and the thought of putting together a website is just too much of investment. They're actually just going to go back to their job working what they were doing before. Sometimes it is the thing that makes or breaks their decision. So you have to, when people are deciding whether to invest, they don't know that they have a problem that you can help them with. They just think they have a generic need. But a generic need isn't enough to make you the person to solve their problems. So I think part of telling the story is that it's not about your story, it's about them. If you can articulate the problem that they don't even know they have and tell them how you're going to solve it by making them think you have a lot in common with them and you are the right person to do that very thing, then, half the work is already done. So it just, because it's my specialist subject, if I say to a photographer, I'm going to write something like, do you want an heirloom wedding album which your children can look through and your grandchildren and enjoy? Or are you looking for beautiful art to hang in your home? You need to articulate. They're just thinking, I want some nice pictures of my kids, but you're taking that a step further and think, do you want to document, your childhood years in your family and have beautiful pieces of art which can last forever in your home?
Okay.
You're articulating their kind of need, their problem, and then you're going to say, I can do this because I can solve this specific, and the reason I can specifically solve it is because I can do these things. I'm this kind of person. So you're always trying to tell your story in the context of them. So when I approach a site, I say to them something we touched on before. the natural human condition is to want to have a conversation. So we need a logical, progressive structure where people know that they're in the right place. They understand who you are. They understand what you do. They can see the proof, and then they can get in touch with you. Mm-hmm. So that's the logical storytelling. But each of those stages needs to be framed in the context of how it can benefit them. So I kind of have a twofold approach, and so we always break that down into the journey that the customer is going to take through your site. Okay. You know, I say don't leave it to chance. In an ideal world, how would a client progress through your site? Where would they go first? What would they find out in order to make them move on to the next level?
I think the parallel of stories and journeys is really apt because, you know, stories are journeys. I mean, every story, there's a sequence of narrative events. You know, there's, you know, each event or each thing that happens is like a plot point and that progresses things along. And so you're talking about using that in the context of both like, you know, scrolling, navigation, things like that. What are some, I mean, you don't have to show me just yet. We're going to jump into that later, but do you have like a description of a narrative flow that people can try out on their own sites? I mean, obviously it's going to be customized to whatever they're working on, but just in general.
Well, yeah, I mean, just to relate it back to storytelling in a bit more detail, like if anyone's ever written a short story or done any kind of creative writing, one of the most common structure that you're taught when you're a writer is that you have an exciting introduction to your story. You draw you attract people's attention, you grab it, and you have them on board. You then give them information progressively so that they are more engaged. And then at some point in any exciting story or a movie, there's a problem, there's something suspenseful, and then there's a resolution, and then there's some kind of summary that ties everything together. So, you know, you can see that as a conversation, as a journey, as just a general narrative structure, but it can definitely work in a website. And, you know, your homepage is your exciting intro. And it's also your handshake. I'm this person. This is what I do. It does what it needs to be. It does what it says on the tin. Because I sometimes see with kind of more creative sites, and it can work definitely, but the kind of mysterious artist site where you can't really work out what they do.
You don't know what they do, who they.
You don't even know where they live. You're like, oh, you know, I'm a free spirit traveling the globe, blah blah. You're like, but where do you live?
Yeah.
What time zone are you on? So, you know, I think I like to blend the exciting and the artistic with the this is what I do, so that people
the practical. I mean, it's got to touch base somewhere.
Yeah. So that's always kind of the key goal of the homepage. And beyond that, I use the homepage to signpost people to the next chapter that they want someone to explore. So if they don't mind whether they go to the About Me page or go and view someone's portfolio next, we're going to have references to 2 of those on the homepage. Mm-hmm. If they're absolutely set on wanting them to go to the About page, sometimes we have just that whimsical paragraph and saying find out more, and it takes you to the kind of About page. But also, I would always say that you don't want to be too prescriptive. I always make sure that you can get to everywhere from the main menu in one click. Mm-hmm. You know, sometimes you see kind of quite menus that only have like 3 links. You're like, oh, why can't I get to this with one link? Or, you know, so that is, you do have to cater. And that's when the other thing I say is we kind of have this process in our office with 3 different questionnaires. We talk about the conversation. We talk about framing the experience in terms of persuading the client that they have a problem that you can solve. Mm-hmm. And the third one is we talk about conversions and quick links. And that is your first time visitor. And in the context of photography, you know, you're happy at that point for them to ramble through your site in the way you want them to do it. But then the returning person, the decision maker, who is at the point of making a decision for whatever your business is, they're probably going to sit down with their colleagues and say, hey, we've narrowed this down to 3 companies that we're going to go with. Let me show you what they can do. And at that point, if they have to get through 3 or 4 clicks to get to your portfolio or your contact page or, you know,
your features page or whatever is going to be the selling point.
It's going to be annoying. So I always think you're on the point of making a decision customer is your other key kind of consideration there. So we kind of break it down into these goals.
It's very adaptive.
It is.
Because you're not only having your target audience, but you're also creating a targeted message for each stage of their journey, which is great.
Yeah, if my only goal is to get someone to go onto my about page, and I have this, beautiful homepage which says that this is the person, I'm this person, this is what I do, find out more about me. The other person who's about to just make a decision can just go portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
They know they experienced that the first time. They know it's not for them. They don't mind that it's there, but they're going to go where they want to go. So you've got to give them the tools for that.
Now, is this a method of design or a way of looking at design that you landed on your own through, trial and error or whatever? Or did you have very specific influences that kind of took you down this path?
I think it was more that I started to. It was after that conversation with my friend in Ohio that I started to look at websites more like conversations rather than
3 years ago.
3 years ago. I think it was that. Yeah, that I really started to think. Every page has to be beautiful. Every page has to have a goal, like where are we going next and why, and how are we going to make people irresistible for them to go to that next page so that they get the optimal experience, that they take the journey we want them to. And I started to read a lot more about that, about goals and how to track how people move through your site to make it interesting. And something I always say to people, you can tell when somebody hasn't really embraced having a narrative where people move through their site when you get 2 or 3 pages deep and you get to what I call the poor, neglected, unloved children. And they're normally the really boring pages like, this is our rates, or, contact us. They're really dull pages and they haven't got any images on and they've just got some text. And and there's no kind of call to action. That people have just basically got bored by the time they get to doing that kind of 5th page. And that they can't be bothered anymore. And they think, oh, well, it's just a rates page. I'll just do whatever. So,
yeah. So, I mean, I think that's a great way to explain it to people is, why, instances in which this approach really kind of saves the day, because I think for people like you and me, we're more or less design theory and nerds. We love to talk about this stuff. And because we live in it so much, we kind of start to see it as self-evident. And I'm not sure most clients, when they're coming to it completely out of context, they don't really see, or care about that angle so much as they care about results. But when you can frame it in, hey, when someone takes a certain path through your site that, improves, this metric or that metric, I think that's a great selling point. Which brings me to 2 questions I wanted to ask on that point is, do you even talk process and theory with your clients, or do you try to focus on results?
Well, we talk about both really. Everything we've just talked about, I would talk about with the client. They need to understand the theory. Mm-hmm. Because I often get 2 types of client. I get the artist, the creative, the photographer, and I don't just do photographers. I get lots of creatives. And they're just like, oh, make it all seem beautiful. And, my work will speak for itself. People will just be so overwhelmed, they'll just pick up the phone. And I'm like, well, they kind of will, but they're looking at 20 sites and comparing them. So you need to work even harder to get them to buy into your story. You need to trigger an empathetic response from them. They need to know it's all about them, not just about you and your awesome work. So we talk about how we're going to do that. But what we do to just test that everything is. Oh, and the other type of client I tend to get is the people who've come. They're switching careers and they've maybe had a sales background or a business background, and they're like, I want a call to action on every page because this is what we do because we're salespeople, and it must say call me or contact me now. And I'm like, well, I completely agree. You have to have a call to action on every page, but it's not going to be a big shouty call me or get in touch. It's going to be leading them on to the place where you want them to go next.
Yeah.
Just if the word call to action makes you go a bit, oh, it's so salesy, it doesn't have to be a call us today or, call us right now and you can get a half price deal on. It's not like selling,
it could be like
double
learn
glazed.
more or watch this video or get this free resource or something like that. And I think, part of the narrative process and building a narrative on a website, and they talked about this in the how to build a great content experience post that we explored in the This Week in WordPress, is that stories have more than 2 plot points. There's more than a beginning and an end. So you can't go from introduction of the main character to final conclusion of the story. There are stages in between. So there's going to be, hey, get to, this is who I am, and then let's get to know each other, and then this is sort of what I do and my work, and or maybe you can swap those second two, and then you might say, are you interested? Okay, let's talk. There's going to be a conversation that takes place, which is what you've been talking about this whole time. And if you don't have, more than 2 plot points in your story, it is going to be it's going to come across as like either completely ineffective and out of touch, or at worst case scenario, really pushy and repulsive. Like, hey, I'm Nathan. Buy this from me right now. Call me now. Call me. Are we used car salesmen, or are we, creative people, or smart, savvy business people? I mean, I think you gotta take your pick when you choose, how you're going to present yourself.
You've got to romance them. I always say that, because imagine going back to that cocktail party scenario. As you said, okay, hi, I'm Nathan. Do you want to buy something from me? You just wouldn't do that in a social situation. So if you wouldn't do it in a social situation, why would you do that on your website? Yeah. Especially if you're selling something, and a lot of people are selling something that's experience-led. Whether you're selling real estate, you want them to choose you because they're going to enjoy the experience of working with you, or eating your pies, or whatever the thing is that you're doing. They have to connect with the experience for sure. I'm really passionate about that.
This is the second question about that I was going to get to, is what kind of positive metrics, if someone's a results-driven person, what kind of positive metrics can you point to as a result of storytelling design? Increased customers, longer retention, fewer bounces, stuff like that. Do you have sort of any statistics or metrics that you have noticed over the years, or as you've adopted this process more?
In terms of stats, I always check in. I do a review with clients after a couple of months, and we will have recorded their previous bounce rates and their page dwell times, how long they're spending. And you can see if you look at user engagement in your analytics account, it will show you how many people are spending 0 to 30 seconds, how many people are spending, I think it's 30 to 1.5 minutes. I can't remember what it is, or 180 seconds plus. It's got all these different brackets. And you can also drill down further and see where they're spending the bulk of their time on which pages. So we're definitely looking for, I'm definitely looking for an improved engagement on the About Us page, because that's a really good metric to know. And then the information and the pricing, just an uplift of time spent on the site. And we also look at the exit points. We'd like to see more people exiting via the contact form.
Great.
That's good news.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And the rest is anecdotal. Clients saying, "Oh my goodness, this person said as soon as I saw your website, I had to book you." So, I get lots of that, which is great.
So I think at this point, I would love to see, these ideas in action on some of your actual work. I think you have a site in production that you're going to show us. Is that correct?
Yeah, I do. This is my first proper Divi 2.4 build, where I've really tried to push the boundaries of what it can do, and it's definitely a site that I couldn't have designed as easily or as well before the big upgrade. So I've been very much enjoyed using it, and this is for a European-based photographer, rather unsurprisingly, called Brett Florens, and he's got a big reputation as someone who trains a lot of other photographers. So for me, it's going to be quite a high-profile site.
Oh, great.
And it'll be
Looks
live.
Beautiful, by the way.
It'll be live by the time this comes out. But this definitely. One thing that I talk about is, and this is my own invention. I'm sure it's probably been covered in lots of business theory books, but I call it the triangle of awesomeness, which is my technical term for it. But one of the big things we do is getting the balance right. And if you think of a triangle, at 3 corners, you've got you. And by that, I mean your personal taste and what you like in terms of fonts and layouts. And you've got your ideal client at the other corner. And then you've got your work or your product or the thing you're trying to sell. And, I always say, if what we're producing falls outside of that triangle, then we know we're not on course. So we're always saying, so I do lots of preliminary research. I get my clients to do Pinterest and questionnaires. And actually, if you go to the Design Space blog, there's a piece called How to... Hang on, let me check what it says. It explains my whole creative process in terms of preparing me and the client, and it's called...
Oh, wow, yeah. That was actually something I'd like us to go over here in a bit.
Okay, let me know. I'll not get off course, but...
Yeah, can you maybe on the Brett Florens website, can you just through a slow scroll down of this homepage, walk us through how the story flow that you're trying to create, and what that, what those principles or what those ideas look like on the page, as opposed to just the descriptions we've been giving as we talked about them.
Yeah. So we wanted a really consistent, and Brett does a lot of advertising in high-end magazines like Vogue Weddings or Elle Weddings, where you pay kind of crazy amounts of money, $10,000 for a full-page advert. And he works in that higher, very, very much higher-end market of kind of $200,000 plus weddings. So he charges lots of money, and he wants people to know that if you book him, you will look like you belong in this magazine. This is his thing. So when we opened the site, we wanted 3 or 4 images, which are what I call signature images. They have to be absolutely killer. And actually, we're still wrangling over what those are going to be. But we wanted to open that with just beautiful imagery and a little arrow, that his logo overlaid, and a little arrow that lets people know that if they scroll, there's going to be an experience. And as you start to scroll, that's when the menu comes down. So you might argue it's a little bit experimental, that people might not know where the menu is, but we do have a down arrow to kind of demonstrate that. And then thinking about the conversation, who he is, and his strapline, simply unique, fashion and weddings. He shoots a lot of fashion editorial, so he wanted to put that up front. He does that. So we also have done a fun play on words that I've separated with a designer. So it says, you could read it as simply fashion, unique weddings, or simply unique fashion weddings. So we had a bit of fun with the kind of copywriting and the kind of the design. Then his goals were, they have to know, if you're buying into Brett Foran's, you're spending a lot of money, they're going to want to know a little bit about Brett to reassure them. This was his key goal. And what he didn't want to do was put his face up front. He wants to kind of let the images talk for themselves, because he feels the bride or the couple that he's marketing to will be wanting to picture themselves in his website. I could be one of those people in that website, as opposed to, oh, I love Brett, there's a picture of him, isn't that nice? So we didn't want to necessarily break the mood. So and here what we've done as well, which we've had fun with, we have used some page anchors. So it's a mixture of one-page scrolling. So if you click about, it does just take you down to a little one paragraph about Brett. And if you want, you can then dive into a bit more information about him. And as you go down, his next goal was to let the images speak for themselves. So we have a quick jump to the galleries there. And finally, if you've gone this far down the page, which we think people will, you can pop up a little video and of him working. And actually, that is a picture of him about 3/4 of the way down the page, just to kind of bring him into that. Or you're seeing a picture of a woman, but we then touched on the third part of the narrative for us is the experience. So who he is, the proof, the evidence, and then the experience. And the experience is going to be video led with the pop-up video. So
that's great.
So as we go down, I really wanted to put the portfolio on the homepage, and this was something that was very difficult to do before. I couldn't have done this as easily or as simply. This took me kind of half an hour to put that grid together, which would have taken me about 5 hours before.
Looking at this site, I'm reminded of something we talked about in our pre-interview process, and I really liked it, and I wanted to bring it up now, is your process from concept to creation of the actual website. So, you've booked your client, you've told your story effectively, and you've connected with them. Now it's time to actually build a website. You don't start by just jumping into Divi and mocking things up in Divi. You have a more design-centric approach, like traditional designer approach, I would say. Can you maybe tell us what that looks like? Because I think a lot of people are going to look at your site and go, "That's fantastic," and they might, think that it's as easy as jumping into Divi and just starting to rearrange modules. When in fact, this is a result of something much more methodical, I would say. Can you describe it for us?
Yeah, definitely. Well, the first thing we do is a lot of the things we've talked about today, the journey, the client conversation, the triangle of awesomeness, all those kind of principles, which just because I'm quite nerdy about it, I love to talk about that kind of stuff. And the clients really enjoy it too. So we have this massive big, I always takes 2 or 3 hours of a massive big meeting like Skype. And I make lots of mini wireframes on paper as they're talking, and I'll hold it up and say, "What, like that, do you think? think that's where they should go next. And we plan out the menu and the journey and the goals for each page. So we say when they're on this page, where should they go next and why? And okay. So I'll tend to wireframe out the journey with the menu and some little arrows. Literally, I'll do it on a piece of paper and scan it in, so we know that the path through is set. And we've got our top menu, and we kind of know how we're going to move them from page to page. I will then, in the meantime, quite a long way in advance, they'll have been off doing lots of Pinterest for me. And that a lot of that is based around brand, like colours and typography. But if you're talking about the user experience, I get them to go and Google, put into Pinterest website layouts or magazine layouts, or I give them a whole load of terms I want them to plug into Pinterest, and I get them to go and pin a load of stuff, website user experience. They go and pin a load of stuff, and then we go through it, and they also give me a list of sites which they love. And I specifically ask them to say, why do you love this site? And I don't want to hear, I like it, it's nice. I want to hear, I like the page in this website because I think it's really cool the way the gallery stretches across the screen, or I think it's really cool the way that the portfolio section has a sortable mini menu. Mm-hmm. I want to hear a lot of detail like that to find out why they're attracted to things that they've seen on the web. So we go through the Pinterest and, why are you attracted to that layout? Oh, I like it's boxy. I like boxes. So you like grids. So we kind of narrow that down to features which they like aesthetically, and then features which they like in terms of its great user experience. So I'll have a couple of short lists of things, and then we'll also be looking at things like the triangle again, their work, the ideal client, and normally from having a look at layouts and getting ideas. And I often tell them to pull stuff out of print magazines, because I want to now with the new Divi 2.5, I'm like, I can do anything, go for it. Yeah,
absolutely. So
put up those magazines.
Once you get all your inspiration and input from them, what is your next step? I mean, how do you go from, you've got everything, all the input you need. What are the few things you do before you hit Divi?
So depending on how clear my vision is, on the client, if the client wants to see a traditional wireframe, and for anyone who doesn't know, it's really just a mock-up of how the site's going to work. And I work in Photoshop, mm-hmm. So I open up a canvas with the middle section is 1080, which is still the standard off-the-shelf Divi, which I like that as the central working section. I add on 200 pixels either side and make it about 3,000 long, put my guidelines in place, and I start to mock it up, normally in grayscale. Like I'll put their logo in gray, and I'll start to put a block. So I'm getting the pixel dimensions right, 650 pixels for a slider, and I'll put slider, and then I will start to kind of box it out. Mm-hmm. That if they want to see all in grayscale, just the boxes and with the calls to action labeled. Sometimes if they want to see that made live, I'll often use an online tool like Balsamic, or there's quite a few different wireframing tools. If they really want to move through a site without it being all styled up and just see it in grayscale, that's great. Very few people these days, photographers don't want to see that, because they think they're working with someone who is an expert in that field, so they just say, I trust you, just do whatever. And if it's someone like that who I have a very clear vision creatively of what we're going to do, I'll just dive in and design a complete finished mock-up of their homepage in Photoshop with their images in, with their colours and their brand. And if I'm feeling very confident, like with Brett, I said, I'm just going to dive straight into full mock-up. And he said, that's cool. I think you know exactly what I want. I did it, and he literally went, no changes, go build it. So
that's fantastic. Yeah.
That almost never happens. So I was like, really? None? So, yeah, normally there'd be kind of 3 or 4 rounds of let's get this homepage nailed. And then I will normally mock up a blog post with the sidebar, and I will normally mock up a gallery.
Yeah.
So, because galleries are very important for photographers. So, but with him, it was very unusual, and he just went, let's do it. It's all good. So
what is your process of taking your mock-up to Divi? Is it pretty one-to-one? You're just straight up recreating, or do you often find that you have to do some stretching of the boundaries of what Divi can do in order to hit your mock-up?
Well, I'm finding it less, that happens less and less. I have in the past got a bit carried away and going, and we'll do this beautiful grid thing. I'm like, I can't do the beautiful grid thing. How am I gonna get around this? Why did I do that? I knew they'd love it, and I knew I couldn't really do it. So I think that happens. Yeah, this one was so... Actually, I did this in PSD just as 2.4 was coming out. So, but I'd read up quite a lot, and I'd been beta testing it. And so I kind of thought I could do what I've done here, because I had a look at a couple of Kenny's demo sites and I thought, do you know what? I can do this. And I just went for it in the Photoshop markup. I thought, I'll make it work. As it turned out, it was super easy to make it work and I shouldn't have been worried. But
that's awesome. That's good.
Yeah, it was really, really great.
So we're hitting close to our time limit, and I like to, at the end of each episode, ask our guest host to kind of leave us with a parting thought that sort of encapsulates their take on our primary topic. So today our topic has been storytelling design. I don't think anybody could miss that. In your opinion, if Divi users want to elevate their own site designs with this approach, what's the most important thing for them to do and or keep in mind as they start down that journey themselves?
I think every page has a unique purpose, and every time you're working on a page, you have to ask yourself how this page is going to solve a specific problem they don't even know they have. So when you're designing a page, it's always about them and it's never about you. And I think when you go back and test, you have a look at some of the pages in your site that you just might think are kind of common or garden, ordinary pages. When you frame it in that context and you go back and look, you can often think, goodness, it's all a bit me, and it doesn't really reference the client or kind of an outcome that they would like to have. It's normally like, look at our great stuff. We have all this great stuff. Our stuff is great. We made it. So I always think that's really interesting to go back and say, how many times have you written, well, we did this and we can do that and I did this, when you're perhaps presenting an item in your portfolio or you're describing a product. Try and just go back through and give yourself a hard time about whether or not you thought about the client in that.
Yeah, and you're talking about the client's client, not...
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're saying, you know, when you're writing on behalf of your client, you need to think of who their customers are going to be and make it about them.
Yeah, and it comes back to the whole testing yourself in the triangle of awesomeness. You know, whenever sometimes you have a client who's like, I so love purple, I want it to be really purple, and you're like, well, you're selling a really high-end product, and I just don't think that, I think these people need more editorial look, more white space. Have you really thought hard about whether your ideal client wears a lot of purple, connects with purple, it's a really strong color? And, whenever you feel like something is not working, feel free and spread the triangle of awesomeness to your client's client. Go and tell them, we have to look at the three, we can't have too much of you in this. We have to have a really nice, well-balanced triangle.
Perfect. That sounds like a great parting thought. Great way to leave the episode off. Melissa, thank you so much for being with us today. It was a great time talking to you. I think it was a great episode.
Complete pleasure. Thank you so much.
Once again, big thank you to Melissa Love for coming on the show today. In case you couldn't tell, we probably could have talked about storytelling design all day long, but alas, all interviews must come to an end and the show must go on. We've got 2 more segments left in this episode. Both segments are designed to help you put the storytelling ideas and principles that Melissa and I talked about today into action. The first segment was supposed to be this week's Divi Quick Tip, but it started to get a little long for that. So instead, I've removed the quick label and simply made it a detailed tutorial on planning and executing custom long-form stories with Divi and WordPress. The second segment is our very first Divi site makeover. So stay tuned because we've got a lot of good stuff coming up. It all started with the New York Times snowfall in 2012. And by now we've all seen them. Beautiful, long-form web stories that defy convention and inspire the imagination. Stories that range in topic from financial journalism to baseball legend, in-depth profiles of musical icons to historical tragedies, as well as personal stories, fiction, and daring experiments in medium-bending narrative. A few short years ago, stories like these were impossible to create without the direct involvement of advanced developers. But thanks to tools like Divi, any WordPress user can now, technically speaking, pull these modern feats of storytelling off. So why don't we see more of them coming out of the WordPress and Divi community? Well, I think the simplest answer is that storytelling is hard. It's sort of like dancing in that we can all do it, but that doesn't mean that we're any good at it. And it certainly doesn't mean we've mastered the finer points of specific dance styles. The same is true of storytelling. By default, we are all storytellers. But to create a great or even good long-form story using WordPress and Divi requires that we understand the finer points of storycraft across a wide variety of mediums, including written text, images, video, web animation, and anything else you might want to include. All of which, in the end, must be brought together under the umbrella of the ideas and principles of storytelling design. The simple truth is that the required time and dedication to storycraft required to become good at telling these types of stories is often more than most people are willing to commit to. But for those of you who are willing to learn, we've created this segment to set you on the right path. I'll be sharing with you a recommended production process and some of what I consider to be essential storytelling tools and resources for crafting beautifully customized long-form stories that any major publication would be happy to publish. It may surprise many of you that before you even begin to build your story with Divi, there are at least 5 other stages of development that your story needs to go through. They are writing, mood boarding and concept art, scripting, and I'll explain in a second why I've separated that out from writing, storyboarding and story mockup, and creation of final design elements. Only after all of these stages of production are complete are you actually ready to build your story with WordPress and Divi. And if this sounds time-consuming, that's because it is. I mean, Divi might take care of the developmental heavy lifting, but creating the content itself is not an insignificant undertaking. However, this process, as time-consuming as it may be, is the most direct path to creating a truly great long-form web story that I'm aware of. That's why, for the remainder of this segment, I'm going to describe each stage of production individually and the tools and resources that will help you master them. Let's dive in. First things first, you need to write your story. And as it turns out, neither the Divi Builder or WordPress's editor are particularly good places to write long-form content. Your best bet is to draft your story in an application specifically built for writing. On the free/cheap end of things, you could use Google Docs for this, or Pages/Word if you prefer, but my personal favorite is an affordable writing software called Scrivener. Scrivener is for serious writing projects. It includes some powerful features like a document bin for organizing your manuscript and accompanying documents, including research, ideas, notes, and more. It also has outlining tools, a corkboard note card view, pre-formatted script and document templates, vertical and horizontal split screen modes, full screen writing mode, and a ton of other useful features. A program like Scrivener is ideal for writing a long-form web story because within a story as potentially media-rich as is possible on the web, you may have standard paragraphs of text followed by a video script, followed by panel descriptions and dialogue for comic book style sections, followed by an audio embed, and the list of possibilities goes on. Scrivener allows you to plan, create, and organize all of those written elements in a single project. This is important because the writing process doesn't end at step 1. It evolves with each step until you have a final script that you can build each section and module from with Divi. So what exactly should you be writing in step 1? I'd recommend writing 3 things in whatever order that you prefer. 1. A story treatment. This is a straightforward prose summary of your story. It should probably be no longer than 5 pages for your own convenience. 2. A detailed outline that includes all plot points and scene descriptions. This can be as long as you need it to be. 3. Character and setting descriptions. It's okay if these descriptions are a little vague at this stage because what they're really meant to do is help guide you in step 2 where you're going to refine those aesthetics. If you have absolutely no idea where to start when it comes to writing a story, I'd like to recommend 2 books to you. The Writer's Journey by Christopher Booker and Story by Robert McKee. Both of these books are highly recommended to script writers, which, as you'll see later, is exactly what you're writing. Stage 2 of the production process is mood boarding and concept art. This is where you want to gather and create all of the visual inspiration that you'll need in order to help describe the graphics during the scripting process, as well as reference during storyboarding and the creation of final design elements. For those unfamiliar with the idea of a mood board, it's simply a collage or collection of related images and media that helps set the aesthetic tone of a project. You can use a wide variety of tools to create your mood board, from paper cutouts glued to a foam board, to Photoshop, to a dedicated Tumblr blog, to Pinterest. And I'm sure there's a lot more. My 2 personal favorites are Tumblr and Pinterest. I like Tumblr because I can theme the blog itself to match the mood, as well as play various types of media without leaving the mood board.
Pinterest is nice because you can not only set your board to private, but all of the Pinterest functions are inherently geared around the idea or concept of mood boarding in the first place, so it's a really natural fit. Depending on your project and preferences, you might want to create several separate mood boards for different characters, settings, web design elements, etc. When you've finished, it's time to script. By the time you get to the scripting stage, you should know what your story is from start to finish. You have an outline that tells you how many scenes or sections you're going to write, and you've got a lot of visual references for everything from page navigation to character design to overall look and feel. Now it's time to head back into your writing application and not only write all of those scenes, but make important decisions about which medium each scene will be conveyed through, and scripting those sections of the story accordingly. You have to ask yourself questions like, is this part of the story best suited for video or the written word? Can I get away with just an image here? What about saying this in an animated GIF or video background? Should this section have audio? Where will I need custom coding? Etc. There are so many ways any given story can be told. With the kind of long-form storytelling that WordPress and Divi allows, the sheer volume of options can become dizzying. I can't make all of those decisions for you, but I can advise you on how to keep all of your ideas organized and formatted in such a way that they will make sense to you down the line and help guide the creation process. Here are a few concepts and guidelines I'd suggest adopting. There are two narrative languages that have the most direct influence on web-based long-form storytelling: the cinematic language of movies and the panel-based language of comics. From a scripting perspective, think of your entire story as an interactive, long-scrolling comic book. If you're using Scrivener or a similar program, you can use their graphic novel script template to guide you. When a specific scene or section calls for video, switch to a video scripting template. This will not only help you greatly during the next few stages of development, but if you're working with a team, you will be able to hand off a video script to the people making the videos, a scene script to the artists/designers creating page sections, and so on. When you're finished, your script should not only contain the detailed contents of each scene, such as prose and/or dialogue, but also provide you with very specific instructions for how each part of the story should be told. In the next phase of production, you'll put those visual storytelling ideas to the test by storyboarding your videos and mocking up the page designs you've described in the script. In the storyboarding and story design mock-up stage, you will not only be working from your script to create sketches, mock-ups, and even prototypes, depending on your preferences, for each element of your story, but using these tests to refine your script and get every aspect of your story ready for final production. By the time you are done with this stage of the process, there should be little to no ambiguity as to what the story will look like when completed, and how each section will function within the Divi builder. Like everything else in this process, it will take quite a bit of time to do properly, but in the end, it will remove a lot of guesswork, foster better collaboration, or simply make it possible in the first place, and result in a stronger final product. Now, if the theory behind what makes visual storytelling work is a mystery to you, or you just like to get better at it, I'd highly recommend checking out the book Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. This book, in graphic novel form, is like a visual storytelling masterclass. Reading it is going to provide you with the principles you need in order to take full advantage of the Divi Builder's grid for storytelling. And best of all, it's incredibly accessible. The fifth stage of the production process is where you create all of the final design elements that you will then use inside of WordPress and Divi to construct your story. To make this process a bit faster and more efficient, I would recommend going through your script and making a master list of every element you will need to create along with its accompanying notes. Then only referencing the full script if you have contextual questions. This will make it easier for you to get a sense of how far along you are on the total workload, as well as the ability to batch the creation of related elements together, or for that matter, give different design/production tasks to different people or teams depending on the scale of the project. At the end of this production process, you should have everything you need in order to simply pull up your script on one side of your screen and the Divi builder on the other side and plug in the final elements that tell your story. And that, Divi Nation, is how to plan and execute custom long-form content for building within WordPress and Divi. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments section of the accompanying blog post for Divi Nation Episode 3 at elegantthemes.com/blog, and I will happily help you out. Up next, our final segment of this episode of Divi Nation, which also happens to be our very first call for Divi site makeover submissions. Check it out.
Divi Site Makeover is intended to be a segment of the Divi Nation podcast where we showcase websites that have been redesigned using Divi. Since this is our first edition of Divi Site Makeover, we're simply asking you to submit your best Divi site redesign along with before and after screenshots to podcast@elegantthemes.com with the subject line Divi Site Makeover Submission. We'll feature our favorites in the first week of October on the Elegant Themes blog and in that week's Divi Nation episode. That's approximately 1 month from now. So if you don't have a Divi Site Makeover submission to send us right now, you still have time to redesign your personal website or a client website and submit it. Once again, send your Divi Site Makeovers to podcast@elegantthemes.com with the subject line Divi Site Makeover Submission for a chance to be featured on our blog and in this podcast. Well, that's all for this episode of Divi Nation. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to submit your footer designs for our most recent Divi Design Challenge. We will be featuring our top picks in next week's episode and on the Elegant Themes blog. To enter, just send us a screenshot and a link to your best Divi footer designs at podcast@elegantthemes.com with the subject line Divi Footer Design Challenge. Coming up on next week's episode of Divi Nation, I talk with S.J. James, the founder of Gritty Social and an avid Divi user, about mastering something he calls the final 5%, what it takes to make a good website great.
Just say to yourself, what is my dream website? Don't think about the limitations of any theme or any platform. And just say, okay, what does this look like and how does it work in an ideal world? If I was the best coder that ever existed and I could build anything in 10 minutes, what would I build? And then get that onto paper.
Thanks again. See you next week.